Hello, mech fans. This is Duncan Fisher. Hold on firmly to your mana potions, fireballs, and familiars, because you are tuning in to your regularly scheduled episode of the First Circuit Podcast.
And welcome to episode 159 of the First Circuit Podcast. Tonight's hosts are Ian.
Hello, I'm a podcat.
Biter.
Blarg, I'm also a podcat.
And old Bob 10025, I'm a podcat as well. So tonight I have no clue what's going on, so I'll give it to Biter. And Biter!
Alright, yeah, so for episode 159, we're talking about our feelings about the last year or so of MWO. I guess you call it Reborn. You know, they've been trying to rework MWO, breathe life back into the game. And so we're just going to feel out how we feel about all these changes and stuff, and get into all that. So, guys, overall, how much have you been playing MWO? Over the last part of the year, has it increased, decreased, anything like that?
Bob, take it away. I think your answer is going to be short.
To tell you the truth, in the beginning I was like, yay, gung-ho. But it came to the realization of where Burnout was big. It was huge. And seeing what they did, I pretty much uninstalled the game. I don't play MechWarrior like online. I might pop it up. I think I popped it up twice this year, but literally and then just took it down. It's not fun. It's not exciting. It's not what it was. It's not what it used to be. And so my take, mostly just reading what's going on and doing stuff like that. And I just haven't been playing. I've been playing MechWarrior 5 though. 5 though.
Yeah, just to probe a little more into that, how long ago did you uninstall? And just very briefly, what was your, sort of main reasons? Just burnout, or is it anything, that has been going on?
I would probably say a lot of it's burnout. For like 6 years, all I did was MechWarrior Online, literally. Videos, podcasts, all that kind of stuff. It's just that's all I did, and you just have a certain point of burnout where the game doesn't become fun anymore. Even with changes to maps, changing with mechs, changing with just different things that go on, it doesn't appeal to what it actually used to be back then. Back in that time of this was like the greatest thing since sliced bread. And with the advent of MechWarrior 5 coming out, where everyone switched over to that to make the different things, you saw a total decrease in time and energy into MechWarrior Online. That just like, well, why am I playing this game anymore? Why am I doing this? Why am I being excited about this game? When obviously the company, it just has the lights on, or just keep it on life support, like pretty much. And the last time, I think I installed about a month ago, I would say. It just doesn't have that appeal. It just doesn't have that excitement. Basically, I find a lot of bitterness from players than I used to actually have from players themselves when I used to play. And there's a lot more of that for some dumb reason.
All right, up next, Ian. How have you been feeling about MWO lately?
It's kind of a two-sided thingy. I forgot the English proverb for it, but so on the one hand, it's I've never really enjoyed playing MechWarrior Online completely on my own. So I've kind of been doing that just as much as I've been doing the last 5, 6, 7 years. So every now and then I get the urge to play MechWarrior Online. I pop it on, I play for a couple games, I close it for the next few weeks. The main reason I've always enjoyed MechWarrior Online was playing with people. And as you may or may not remember, our good friend Lars has not been playing MechWarrior Online with groups for a long while now. Mostly because there was a point where we couldn't find the 8 and then later 12 people we needed to actually start a group. That has thankfully changed with the introduction of SoupQ. So ever since then, I have been playing more regularly than I was before, whenever we got a 2 or 3 man group together. But for the most part, it's still whenever there are people who want to play, I play. And otherwise, every second or third week, I'll play for a couple hours, but it's nowhere near as intense as it was back at the beginning of the game. So I'd say in the past year, my playtime has been going up compared to before, especially after the skill reset we've had. I've been playing on a variety of accounts, just checking out the different skill tiers and such. I had a bit of fun with that, but it's not back to where it was like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I just have two things to add though, basically, as far as streamers. Since I keep in touch with streamers a lot, and even the streamers that used to do it 24/7, they're actually jumping off to different avenues of games. They actually stopped streaming MechWarrior Online, and you see a bunch of different types of streamers doing it. And yeah, so that's what I putting that in there.
Yeah.
To be fair, you can't stream one game for
Yeah. Oh yeah.
how long has MechWarrior been out?
God.
2012, 9 years, close to 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been around for a while, but like you just noticed, they jumped and doing different things instead of just MechWarrior like online. They were diehard people, diehard, big time.
I mean, yeah, you were also tired, right? And
Yeah.
eventually you just burn out if you do something too much.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, it's uh overall, I think if you look at the Steam chart in the corner there, we had so many more players, obviously 5 or 6 years ago, and it's been a slow, steady stream downwards from there. MWO has a surprising longevity, but yeah, it is a game very long into its life cycle, and there has been a lot of change to the game, but as its fundamentals, in some ways, it is still MWO. There's even if you sort of change up the maps, change up the weapons, do all these other little things that they have been doing. If you've just played the game for thousands of hours, it's the it's just more hundreds of hours you're piling on top, and there's a certain point where you get burnout where you already own all of the mechs. I think
Yep.
on the most fundamental level, that is probably still the case. For me personally, yeah, I think Soup Q was very much sort of a mixed blessing, much more of a chance to play with people, but I didn't necessarily actually get that much more chance to play with people, just in the way how I go about the game. I often, at least, I come and go from MWO, and when I come back to the game, I like to play solo for quite a bit, just to get myself reacquainted with the meta, for me to get more comfortable with my mechs, and so I can get back into that position where I'm carrying my lance again. And the tricky thing is that with how the spawns and everything else is jumbled up and how the game plays, it just does not feel quite the same at all anymore playing as a solo. And that's really hurt my ability to sort of get back into the game. The changes and other things I'm not always the biggest fan of, so that's also sort of a disincentive for me, which is why I particularly not played. But yeah, let's talk about what PGI have been trying to do, though. Burnout is just something that's going to happen, but they've been trying to right the ship and trying to make the game fresh, and they have done a lot of changes. If you look at all those patch notes, those are filled with details.
Well, yeah, they basically they're changing the maps, changing the mechs. They're actually putting new mechs out, which is I think what every month now, just like they used to do it like before with the two different mechs and the extra ads and like stuff like that. They've
The
been
mech packs,
yeah, the mech
those are
packs,
like
yeah.
every other month or something like
Which
that. It's just
which is good. Yeah, basically doing changes like that does bring in the player base. Don't get me wrong, but it just seems it's on life support like until probably next year or the year after that, and then even then it's kind of like it's you
so.
know it's not going to be
Here's the
there.
thing I feel about the mech packs. I think they'll find enough way to support the game, at least if you're still active. The thing is, there's a huge issue with bloat, that we have so many variants already in the game. It's very, very difficult to add something that truly is new. So, like, the first mech pack came out with something like the Grand Dragon.
Mhm.
Ooh, the Grand Dragon. Now that it's so many months down the line, is the game really that much more fun because the Grand Dragon happens to exist? My feeling is mostly no. The Grand Dragon, I hardly see it played, or I hardly play it. I mean, if it's one of the mechs people really like taking out, they'll take it out, and you'll see it plenty. But like most variants in the game, they probably are relatively niche, and it doesn't actually change anything. There's so many mechs that can just do what the Grand Dragon can do, if not better. There are variants like the new Thunderbolt, Mask, and ECM. That's kind of neat, though. Of course, you get into the little issues of that Thunderbolt replacing other variants, perhaps, or that more ECM is going to cause more issues for missiles. And so that slowly, if you introduce more and more variants of ECM, the first three out of 4 variants had ECM. You're just going to have more and more issues added to the game. At least you're going to slowly change the balance, a bit like if you add the AMS Corsair. So more and more variants, I don't think, it's fine to support the game, but they really aren't game changers, would be my opinion on it.
Yeah, that's I think what the main issue is. Does it, is it juice with their squeeze? Is it worth it to put this in there? They can only do so much. I understand that they can only do so much compared to what the engine can actually support and go and do, what they could change and all that kind of stuff. But what can they do to make the game fun, to bring in new players, to change it to a significant amount besides just putting out mech packs or changing maps up a little bit? They need something to bring in the old players, bring in the new players, bring in the casual players. Because that's your main base of people that actually want to come back, and they come back and look at it to play for 6 games. They're like, well, this is the same thing. Then they go off and do something else.
Yeah, I don't. I think that is, compared to the sheer scale of Burnout and how long the game is in its life cycle, the feeling I get is that there is no easy, real answer to that.
No, it's
Maybe a
not.
fun mode, but even then, a fun mode has to be really, really, really fun. Like that thing has to be a hit. Like they came out with Solaris, that's a kind of neat idea, but obviously in the long run, it wasn't really that fun. It wasn't really engaging, and therefore it didn't, increase player count.
Yeah.
So the thing is like a fun mode, that has been talked about. It was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. That could be a great way to revitalize the game, but it's a gamble, just like any change. There's risks and benefits to all of them.
Yeah.
To go through what has been changed though, like I think, as I sort of said, like along with the line of new mech variants, there's been a lot of changes like to mech agility, mech quirks, etc. Now they're doing a lot of changes, but the tricky thing is with all of these changes is, let's just think of an example like the Spider Hero, the Ansai. That thing has 2 ballistic hard points, and it had like no machine gun rate of fire, so they're just going to increase the machine gun rate of fire. Well, that's nice. That does make the mech more usable. It's just before the change and after the change, I have a feeling almost no one really used the Spider Hero. And so therefore, fundamentally, the game hasn't really changed.
Yeah.
You could change that hero's agility values, and again, it's nice when you're using the mech, but it's only a slight quality of life feature. It's the same game fundamentally. It does not address the issues of burnout. And as far as all the quirks go, a lot of them are going to be, the majority is stuff like, oh, we're going to give this one 10% cooldown, a little bit more armor. They're nice changes, but they're nothing like the fun quirks we've had in the past, like the Rapid Fire AC2, Blackjack, the very agile, Vindicators or Quick Draws, etc. Like there are a couple of variants that, there are exceptions, but for the most part, the majority of the time, if you're picking a variant, it's better now. The mech might have some of its issues ironed out, but this isn't a game changer, at least in my opinion. It's nice, but it's not necessarily a reason to come back to the game.
Yeah, and also when everyone's special, no one's special. That sense, with all the mechs getting, I'd say buffed. Yeah, all the mechs are getting buffed basically, so no one are really getting buffed, and the specialization isn't quite there. But that's kind of detail. I think one of the interesting things we've kind of touched on, but not really, is the whole burnout thing. How do you combat burnout when you're talking about a player base that's multiple thousand people strong? How do you fight against that collective burnout? What can you do to get people to, I don't know, stop playing the game for a month and get their life balance back and then come back with fresh energy? I
That's
feel
a,
like that's kind of a more of a real life question than a game design question at this point.
well, that's a really good question. Actually, that's a really good question. How do you do it for multiple people? And then what do you do for individuals? Um, I I know for myself when when I had Burnout before and then came back for about 6 months or something like that, and then burned out for a month or two, is that doing different builds and just silly dumbass builds that try to make them work. Just like we were talking about the spider, like Ansi, is I'll use it, just to see if I can do something with it, type thing. You get that challenge back, like in the game itself. And that's I think one of the ways people can actually stop burnout is just do something else besides the dire well with the PPC Goss and like whatever, basically some meta build you always use all the time to get the points and the score, type thing. And if you do something else besides the builds you normally use, and just try using a freaking rifleman or something like that, just some mech that like it doesn't work, but you try to make it work, and then that creates more of incentive to actually play the game more.
And there goes Old Bob offending a whole group.
Yeah,
of
screw
people,
you,
all the
Rifleman.
Rifleman fanboys.
So
but like majority though, I don't know what they can do. To tell you the truth, it just feels the game's on life support and ready to crash and burn in next year. That's
all right.
that's
There's a very difficult question to answer, I think. But here's a starting point, at least in my head. If I'm sort of a casual fan and I'm sort of burnt out from the game, I come back after a month. What am I going to look at? I go to the MechWarrior Online website. I see patch notes. I click on that, and there's just a wall of gameplay changes.
yeah.
If I'm a person who is not too involved in the game, a wall of just slight quirk changes and stuff. It's just like it's a monstrosity to get your head around. So I'm just like, okay, they've changed the game or whatever. I click back and I click event. And I log in, I see what the event is. Oh, all right, I just need to go in. I do damage, and I might feel incentivized to go into the game and earn some C bills. Who knows? All the
Yeah.
extra goodies you get for your weekly events, your monthly events, or whatever. Next month, some other casual person comes, someone who's not super involved in the game. They've taken a step back from MWO. They come up, they turn up, and they go, "Oh, what's the patch notes? Oh, look, it's another huge list of really tedious details." They go to the event page. What is the event this week? Is it really different? Oh, well, it's do 5,000 damage, get this much match score, get shoot down a UAV or whatever. It's for me, it's sort of like the way you're selling your game is really dry and boring. That would be at least on the PGI side of things. That free mechs are actually the best incentive. I think probably is the thing that oh, if I play this month, I'll get myself an Ebon Jaguar. I'll get myself a Hellspawn. And you just need to make sure people know that Hellspawn has gotten a new quirk for 5 SRM6s, and the Ebon Jag has gotten new quirks to do a whole host of things because it's an Omni mech.
Yeah. Yeah.
But fundamentally, I feel sort of like with most of these patches, they're incredibly dry and they're for the most dedicated of players. And the way they are sold to an audience, for me, it feels like there needs to be almost just less walls of text of changes and more just coming up with a cohesive plan to really sell the game is changing. Like in my head, if you did a wave of quirk changes for just light mechs, for example, it's like, well, this month hopefully we're going to see a whole bunch of light mechs or just this that, and the challenges would be for playing as light mechs or something like that. So each month or every couple of months or something like that, it feels like something is going on in the game, that there's an event going on, rather than the closest we get to it is there happens to be a lot of Hellspawns. There happens to be a lot of Ebon Jaguars. That's the closest as what we've got to a sort of really, other than the gameplay changes, if you're just a more casual player, all you're really sort of seeing is the free mechs. And that is an improvement, but it's still, the majority of it is really quite dry.
Well, to like expand what you're talking about, like, every Thanksgiving, what happens? What happens with the event? Every Thanksgiving, October, and Christmas, what happens?
So what type of? There's always the same events.
Yeah, grab bags. Yeah, it's grab bags.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you're looking at their engine they have to use with. I get it that it's like one of the they can't do much with and so they have to like say 5,000 damage, 2,000 match score, like whatever, basically whatever they may have for it, and so they don't really have that option, and I get it basically, but unfortunately though. a lot of people who don't really think or have critical thinking about that don't get it, and they'll just look at it and just like you said and go, and we go do something else. This is boring. I'm going to go and off and play Pokemon or Fortnite or something, type thing. So it's not their fault for having a crappy engine, but at the same time, get creative, get imaginative of what you can do, and that's what they did with the mechs. That's what they did with the free mechs.
Well, it's
Mm.
not their fault for having a crappy event engine. I mean, they built it, so
Well,
yes.
they didn't build
But
it; they
actually
bought it
wanna-
though. Didn't they buy it? They bought the rights to it. There's another company actually made the game, right?
Well, yes, but game engine and the engine that you end up using in a game are usually two very different things, unless you're specifically trying to go with a vanilla game engine that's not modified. And I know CryEngine a bit. It's
Mhm.
heavily modified to make mechs work. That's given. But I actually want to go back to something Bida said. The clustering changes in a way that it feels like the game is changing. I think that's actually a really good point. You remember about a year ago, that's kind of why we're doing this right now, because the changes were started about a year ago. We got a big roadmap where they had like every 3 or so months, here's a large segment of stuff we want to change. And I get a feeling that's kind of died off. And I feel like this
Yep.
dying off of this roadmap has also kind of correlated to my excitement dying a bit off.
Yeah.
Because on the roadmap, you see like, okay, this month or this 3 months, we're going to focus on the big Mac rework. We're going to put together a giant list of changes, rework all the Mac works. And that's that's a source of excitement for me, this bundle of, okay, I'm going to go in at some point and all the Macs are going to be different and it's going to be great. But what ended up happening is, check, we got a couple Macs, and another couple Macs, now another couple Macs, and none of them really stood out in a way. And I often go back to League of Legends as a comparison, because League of Legends is another one of those super long running games that's somehow still alive and somehow really fun. And what I've been trying to do for a while is take a class of characters and rework not individual random characters, but take the whole class and rework them. So they had all the assassins and they reworked all the assassins at the same time. So at some point you dropped in and boom, suddenly the game had completely new type of assassin and they played very different. And I think that's something that Bayer brought up that would have been really cool to do. I mean, hindsight's 2020, but still take all the light mechs and say, okay, this month all the light mechs are gonna get changed, and today is the month of the light mech, and just communicating like this.
Yeah.
I do think that would have made a big difference in also the patch notes. Like right now, the patch notes are random. You kind of scroll in or you press Control F and search for the mech you want to play and be like, anything changed? Okay. Or if they just did, okay, month of the light mech. So, all the light mechs are changed. So if you play a light mech, something has changed. That would have been much easier to communicate to people in the patch notes.
I think on the side of communication, yeah, back when they started MWO Reborn, there was like weekly, bi-weekly sort of dev logs. You
Yeah.
had the roadmap and stuff. There's a lot of work and communication. And for the last few months, it's been mostly sort of silence until there would be an occasional vlog where they turn up and they sort of say, "Hey, look, here's the reworked map," and they just sort of all chat about, "Yep, here's the new map. Look, it's new." And we did have a devlog recently, and it carried that kind of energy.
It just
Um,
it just stopped the momentum pretty much. PGI has their momentum stopped because they're not even happy about it. That thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So to talk on the PGI side of things, obviously they've never been the best at communication, but also what kind of resources do they have at hand? And for this whole year, all it's been is really they got a guy to do some maps. There was talk of them getting an external studio in to do code work for them. They were given a quote, I think, and PGI said, "Oh, well, we can do it cheaper in-house." So they aren't actually getting help from outside to do coding work. They have to actually decide themselves to get somebody to code. But they're really, in the long run, it's just they're dragging their heels on really getting anyone in to do any more
Yeah.
significant changes. So their tool set is very limited.
Well, like look at it
Yeah,
like
and
this though.
I would really much like to know what exactly is going on there. So, Darren, Matt, if any of you see this by chance, I would love a dev vlog, blog post, or even a tweet just saying like, what went wrong?
That's hard for a company to.
I know it's not easy to talk about internal stuff. I
Mhm.
know you're probably not allowed to talk about a lot of stuff, but just general hint. Did anything go wrong? Did you just lose momentum? Did you run against the wall that you couldn't break through? Is there still hope? Have you just kind of given up? That's kind of the question that have been running around in my head for the past few weeks and honestly months at
Hmm.
this point.
Well, like you got to look at it like
Yeah.
this though. Like you had Darren for a while that says, "Oh yeah, we got me and Matt and like two other people work on MechWarrior Online." You're sitting there going, "Well, it's a huge game. Like what the hell?" Basically, you had it's like patching a hole in a dam, but the dam is like and with a band-aid, but the wall is like or the hole is like 6 feet wide, type thing. You're just kind of like, what are you doing with like three people? And because obviously MechWarrior 5 was the moneymaker. It came out on PlayStation, came out on Xbox, PS5, and all that kind of stuff, and that's their money. That's what they're working for. But you see that in many other game systems and many other games that are out there. It's like, well, that's on the back burner now, and that I mean, there's a dedicated player base. Don't get me wrong, but that's on back burner. We're working on MechWarrior 5. This is where the money is, and I mean, companies are in the business for making money. They're not there to make something cool. They're obviously there's a money aspect inside anything a company does. So that's where their focus is, and then it happens all the time in games. If you're a gamer, for as long as I have, you see this constantly. They put the old game in the background, say, that game's done. Don't worry about it, and we're going to work on XYZ. Same thing with Battletech, and like from the Harebrained Schemes, they put it on the back burner. They're like, okay, we're done, and we're going to go make whatever they're making now. I don't know what they're making now, but
Yeah.
Harebrained Schemes is the same thing. Every company does that.
So what I've talked about in the past was the impression I got from Darren about how things are going to go is that, oh, if you talk to the community and get enough buzz, we'll get you one guy. And if one guy doing some work generates enough positive returns, we'll get another guy. So basically a rolling snowball effect. Just you start with a small team and you make it larger and larger and larger and you do more and more stuff for MWO. The thing is whilst you got a big spike because they talked about MWO Reborn, and there was a bit of a spike when we introduced the big weapon change pass. Beyond that, things have sort of decayed or died down a bit. And so, if the whole plan is a snowball effect, then the snowball is getting smaller.
Yeah, though to be fair, if if we're talking about the snowball effect, if we zoom out to let's say the past 3 years, there was a big spike. So like, got what you said. Do
The
buzz, we get
announcement.
the first guy, more buzz, another guy. We got the buzz for the first guy, but I feel like we've never really gotten the first guy, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Or the first guy hasn't generated additional returns. It seems,
Yeah.
Them talking about working on MWO and keeping the lights on more actively has, it has bumped up the player base. But the perhaps the feeling is that Russ looks at these numbers and says, all right, we're doing mech packs, we're getting money, but we're not getting enough money. And we've got more players, but we haven't gotten enough players. And I'm not really going to hire somebody else to do more work on the game. Am I really going to see a return on that investment?
Yeah.
And that would be my guess for what Russ's thought process is. All right, I got Darren on, we got a return. I got a map guy, we got maybe some return, maybe not. I'm not feeling it so much anymore. That's my guess of what's going on behind the scenes.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, it's kind of important to talk about the December patch because obviously Francois is as I believe he was a new hire specifically for MechWarrior Online from outside the studio.
I think so, yes.
And so far, I don't feel like he's really generated a lot of value. We've talked about it last episode, our displeasure about most of the map reworks. So December is going to be a really big and really important indicator if people like the new map. Because if people dislike the new map, I don't really want to say his hiring was wasted, but he didn't really generate a lot of positive buzz at that point.
Let's just say if I were Russ and the map doesn't do too well, then I'm really not too going to be wanting to hire somebody else.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
we got someone. They made a map. It wasn't popular. Why should I hire more people? I mean, you know, it's a silly. Sometimes could be very close-minded, but you know,
Yeah.
if this was your prime pick, this was your first pick for somebody to work on the game, and this is the results you get. You know, but yeah, who knows? We did actually see them talk about the new map, and we got a bit more of a glance at the new map. This isn't the focus of this episode, but to me, it does look a little bit of a mess. Though, who knows? Who knows? When they discussed the map, I found it a little interesting. They just said, "Oh yeah, yes, there's lots of places for, you know, brawlers, mid-range snipers," and I was like, "Well, that's not necessarily a full picture of how you should design maps. At least,
Yes.
the thing is, a sniper perch aiming at nowhere when no one goes. Like I could have a sniper perch at the spawn. That only really matters if we're doing faction warfare and they're spawn camping us. Otherwise, MWO always follows a certain pattern. You both spawn, at your two different opposite ends of the map. You move towards the center, and a brawl happens. So really, what matters is just your choices leading up to the middle, and then what can you do at the middle. That's kind of why I always like, Rubelite Oasis. You have multiple choices where you go up on top of the building, go down below the building, and then when you're on the building or down below, you can always go left or right. You can always make choices in the center. Rubelite Oasis around the outside is just open plains. There's barely anything there. But it doesn't matter because MWO has a flow to its maps. And a big part of that flow is a question of how do snipers interact with brawlers? How do mid-range interact with brawlers and snipers, etc., etc., etc.? It's not just you need a position for every type of mech. It's how do all these different playstyles interact, and how do you make sure that is a fun experience for everyone? Because if you have a completely flat map like Polar Highlands, it's a great map for snipers. And
Not
maybe you
fun
could
for
put some,
brawlers.
yeah, no fun for brawlers. But even if you just put random rocks in the field and say, well, brawlers can poke out from them if they wait long enough. It's like, yeah, technically true, but obviously that's not the whole picture.
Another point though, you need to always keep in mind MechWarrior Online is a 12 versus 12 game, so you don't want to give too many options for too many playstyles, or let me rephrase that. You don't want to give, for example, the snipers 6 positions to go to necessarily, because realistically, on average, you're gonna have like 1, 2, maybe 3 snipers per game, because the teams just aren't that big. So it's more important to kind of focus on what Biter said, getting the flow correct and less giving too many options, because again, it's 12 versus 12, not 64 versus 64. And
Yes.
like with a battlefield where you also have respawns, and you really need this many options, because otherwise you're just going to the same thing over and over again.
Like scattering random barrels everywhere and just making sure there's ramps everywhere is great in like Call of Duty or something where you have constant respawns, because it's a more arcadey experience where you could just you could spawn in any corner of the map in deathmatch, for example. And so therefore you always need just pieces of cover against any angle, and you need to be able to go to any position, that there isn't some big flow to the battle. But MWO is different. It has a big flow to the whole thing, and that's sort of the disquiet I have a bit about all of the changes, is that even with what little powers they have, like it feels like to me the biggest thing was sort of the weapon changes, and overall, like that those changes pushed a lot more for the longer ranged energy weapons, so large pulse, ER larges, somewhat PPCs as well on the IS side. But basically, you could have a lot more potent laser vomit mechs. And the thing with those is those are much more well dispositioned towards being poking mechs rather than mechs that really want to get stuck in like a DACA mech or a missile mech, so to speak. And that actually just comes back to my sort of feelings that even as a solo before, soup queue is a big factor, but also a factor is just that the game isn't not as fun for me anymore. And I think for me, it's the weapon changes are sort of pushing the game towards a more pokey playstyle, where it's just a lot of people hiding behind random barrels and sniping at each other. And well, if I want to play a game where you sort of snipe at each other, I just play World of Tanks. That's way more, decisive.
Yeah. You actually bring up
um,
a good point though. Like the
yeah.
game is just not fun anymore. I could barely run 3 games before. before you go, okay, I'm done. I just don't want to play this. It's the same thing, same exact thing, same people playing the game, same styles. They're not doing anything tactics wise. They're not doing anything quote fun. Like I remember times that we're like, okay, let's do this, and like it was totally off the wall. Go to some island out in the middle of nowhere, and they have to come to us. We shoot them, and basically we won the game. That was like fun stuff to do. And now it's like, why'd you go over there? That was the no one goes over there. It's like, well, I want to go over here because it's fun. I'm going to do something different, and that's the point that I think we're always trying to like emphasize. People are doing the same exact thing, going to the same spots. I mean, literally in the first minute, you can tell if the game's gonna be won or not, just by who's going where, what mechs are going where. And you can
It's
generally
always sort
tell.
of decided at that first minute, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
you can generally tell who's gonna win the game. You have a
so
95% chance to figure out who's gonna win or not.
I think in the past you could always take ER large laser sniper and move to that hill on Crimson Street, and the
Yeah.
same applies now. And the ER larges have gotten some buffs, so you're more likely to have mechs that can actually back you up in that play style. So that is actually less of a faux pas nowadays than it was then. For me, though, talking about fun, because they were quote unquote designing for fun, it's a big part of it is actually just I really like in MWO standing shoulder to shoulder with my teammates and doing a concerted push together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, I don't really want to just peek and poke. At least peeking and poking is fun when I'm doing it, but when I'm fighting a PPC sniper, I have no opportunity to really return fire. You have to try and shoot at the top of the hill before they peek it, expecting them, or something like that. It gets ridiculous. Basically, mechs peeking you are really, really difficult to counter, and I much more prefer, like for me, if I have to fight against a PPC sniper at long range or an AC2 Dakar bow, I prefer gameplay-wise the AC2 Direwolf, because the Direwolf has to remain in the open to keep engaging, and therefore there's a back and forth that, hey, this guy is asserting pressure, but he is also putting himself at risk. And like I can engage him, press R, and my team's LRM boats will help support me. But if everyone is a sniper, it doesn't really work out that same way. Even though I sacrifice my armor, I don't really buy space for my team against a PPC sniper, because we aren't actually trading with the sniper, so to speak. And so just the weapon changes have pushed things much more on the energy side, a lot more for peeking and poking. Like I've heard people talk about, oh well, brawling is still a thing, and true, I do like brawling. So what do I take? I take 2 LB20s and 2 snub nose on a Corsair. That's a really good build right now, because you get really close to the enemy, you expose for a moment, and kablam, you do a huge amount of damage. But I mean, it obviously I back away and the opponent has not really much of a response to it, and it's not really me coordinating with someone else to push out and
Yeah.
really engage heavily with this target. There's not this standing shoulder to shoulder men at arms that we've done before. They push very hard to break up the NASCAR and the camaraderie seen in MWO. And so for me, matches feel a lot more scattered and just sniper fights. And ultimately, at least, that on top of the issues with soup queue and everything else lead to me just having less fun.
Well, like you rarely even see tactics, like in the game. Rarely. Like they did give the Raven an extra plus 100% sensor range or something like that, or like sensor.
Seismic.
Yeah, seismic, right?
Innate seismic.
It doesn't matter. Basically, he's just gonna stay by himself and do what he's gonna do. There's no tactics involved. The lights really don't scout. The mediums don't plug up holes. The heavies don't. Basically they're off doing their own thing, and the salts are doing their own thing. It's just tactical wise and running with your teammates and like coordinating with them and all that kind of stuff. I don't see it. I mean, they're probably out there. Don't be wrong, but literally all the games I played, every single time I played is just, you don't see it whatsoever. And even when you have 4-man teams, you just don't see it. I mean, it's just not there. Tactics are not there anymore. It's just run up, kill, do as much damage as possible, get your points, and then go off and do something else. There's no tactics.
But the tactic is you find a good firing position, you carefully engage the enemy, and then you make sure you minimize harm to yourself, and then you move out again, carefully engage the enemy, and win your trades. The meta has been pushed towards those. If you like engaging in inefficient trades, then yeah, the game has improved. But obviously, MWO for like 5+ years has had players running around in big blobs of NASCAR, and
Hmm.
for some reason they liked it, and they kept doing it for years. And
Still doing it.
breaking up that play style obviously is going to break up what people found fun in that play style.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like people play the game for different reasons and different ways of like what they're doing. Some people like to win at all costs. Some people like to go in blobs of mech. Some people like to do like other things. It's like that's fine. That's perfectly okay.
This
Actually,
is my
yeah.
my thought process though, is this does tie into map design, that you have in various games, different maps play very differently. So if it's Call of Duty or something, this very big, if you had a Polar Highlands type match, everyone knows this is time for shotty snipers.
Yeah.
If you have a close urban environment, perhaps this isn't the time for snipers. This is the time for submachine guns and shotguns and the like. And hey, there's a map which has a mix of all the various different ranges and stuff. In MWO, you can't really prepare your build for that, but the point still stands that what we see with a lot of the maps is it's really odd how PGI went about this. They looked at the game and said, most people really like forming NASCAR. So what we're going to do is go to the most popular maps and break those up and try and make them a bit more snipey, or have a lot more random barrels and make the flow a lot more constricted. So it's harder for you to all push together as a group. And the thing I was like, if all they want to do is iron out the kinks in the game, they really need to just address primarily Polar Highlands and Alpine Peaks. Both of those maps had huge issues for a lot of mech builds, and for me, they were the most the parts that I had the least fun in. So what they've done instead though is they've gone into the game and changed the maps that people had the most affection for, and they've left some of the maps that people had the least affection for. You're doing
Yeah.
things back to front.
For some reason, Alpine is now more fun than our good old Caustic Valley.
Yes, my favorite map, of course, gets ruined.
And what Bida said earlier is actually something I've never really thought about, but you're totally right. Nowadays, with the new, more pokey meta, skill in MechWarrior Online is mostly defined of being able to find a good rock, being able to poke out and expose the minimal amount of time, and properly aiming. So, like, you kind of have to use a mouse if you want to be good. The whole how you position, how you torso twist, how you run around certain mechs, how you run around a group, how you use cover to dip in and out with faster mech. All of that stuff is kind of vanished, and the new mechs, as well as the balance changes to weapons, have really accelerated that change. Where, especially if you go on something like HPG and you just have people, they find their corner and then they poke. And that's all they do. And for me, coming in as a more casual player who's been playing the game for years and prefers the more fasty hit and run style of mechs, there's not really anything for me to do because, yeah, I can poke. I'm doing fast mechs, so I can probably poke fairly well, but it's just not enjoyable to me personally.
Yeah, I very much agree that it is a playstyle some people like doing, but obviously pushing everyone into that mindset, into that thing is not necessarily fun. Smaller mechs, lighter mechs just aren't doing so well, and more mobile playstyles aren't quite the same as they used to be. And so overall, it's like I think as we started with, the biggest points is just that we are fatigued with MWO, and it's the same game fundamentally. It's still, I did a fair number of poke builds before. I still do them now, but a lot of the variety has been stripped from the game. With a lot of the nerfs and things to it. I just have a lot less interest in conforming to a certain play style.
Basically like to let PGI know that we love that you've made this game. Don't get me wrong. Don't get us wrong on anything like that. We love to make it. It's a great basically 12 versus 12 shooter as far as being out there compared to what was before. It's just we're talking now. I don't know how to express it.
I'm gonna go another step further. I love what PGI has done in the past
Mhm.
year, but I have very much issues with who they've enlisted to help and how they've been taking feedback. And I think that plays a major role into how both the map and the weapon changes have come about, is how they took feedback. And
Yeah.
for the sake of time, do we kind of want to get into that now?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think we should get into that. Like, do we want to go over like our first experience over this community with the whole MWO Reborn? Start from the very beginning.
Yeah, let's. By the
Yeah.
I wasn't around, and by the time I was around, Bob had deleted all the messages. So I'm gonna let you guys summarize
I
it.
didn't delete like anything,
But
did I? Where?
I don't
yeah,
remember the
you
message.
deleted all the things, and I wasn't able to read it. And
No.
I wasn't
I
sure.
didn't
But
delete like anything.
for those of you who didn't catch on yet, we're gonna be talking about this particular incident, still known as the Gulag, nowadays known as the Cauldron.
Okay, yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, but I'll just leave it up to you for the beginning of that.
All right. So to set the scene, this is soon after I think we had like Darren appeared on our podcast. Yeah, we had a chat with him about how the past, present, and future of MWO and stuff. He turns up on No Guts, No Galaxies Twitch, and in chat, he's saying, "Oh, we're still looking for feedback and stuff." So in chat, I say, I repeat my request that I made in the podcast that it would be great if we had more data to help us make more helpful, grounded feedback.
Which, by the way,
To
is
the
still
API.
a valid request.
Yes,
I
a
still want more
prominent
data.
yeah, a prominent Gulag member notices me and speaks up in the chat, calling me a stupid noob, saying, I was just someone who blamed all the game's failings on the competitive community. Now, I'm really confused by this because, like, at that point, I had actually done very little to no complaining about the competitive community up until that point. And it's really also off base because I'm actually kind of good at the game, and that was all besides the point when I was just asking for more data. What the why why call me a noob at this point is sort of it's a very odd thing to do, and it wasn't the first time I saw it that day either. Some earlier in the day I was in someone else's chat, just in someone else streaming the game, and I was discussing mech builds with them, and some random person came up and said, "Oh no, all my points are flawed because I had, critiqued the competitive community or whatever." And I was like, "Wait, what do you mean?" And he said, "Oh, you know what you said." I was like, "Wait, no, I don't." Um, you know, and so I thought about it for a bit, and from this we deduced that the way they talked about it, that this name calling could only really have one source. When we were planning to have Darren on our show, I had written up some ideas for how to represent the more casual fans out there, and one earlier hypothesis I had come up with was to discuss how casuals usually want something fun and easily accessible, like beer pong. It doesn't require high skill to play beer pong. You just throw the ball and then drink and stuff. But competitive people, in contrast, will usually ask for something much more complicated and controlled, something like chess. Um, Now, it seems like one of our former guests, who is a fan of the competitive community, was not too happy to see my hypothesis that chess might not be the most thrilling of experiences for everyone. And they went around various places to smear my name because of how much of a slight this hypothesis was to the competitive community. And yeah, what we had to do was obviously like this podcast. If anyone knows our tone, we're usually trying to be much more fans of the BattleTech franchise. That's why we have people on from community members and game designers, and we try to make it a relatively encouraging experience. And this was this hostility was them trying to find fuel for because we had Darren on, and I don't even know what we really did that should necessarily be that objectionable. We just sort of chatted with him and gave our perspective on things. Is that really too hard? Anyway, it meant we had to lock down the Discord because we can't have people from the community smearing other members of the community for this stuff. But yeah, this is our first real experience with the members of the Cauldron. They called me names because I dared to come up with a hypothesis that was trying to show how casual play is different and distinct from competitive play
You bastard.
in a relatively private setting. Um, Yeah. um. Anyway, in the
Yeah.
end of the day, yes. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, generally though, from the competitive, like, I mean, I used to be part of that. I used to be part of MechWarrior 4 in the competitive field, and it's, I mean, I just can't even tell you. Basically, there's so much competition, there's so much, stress involved that that you get into this kind of flow of elitism, and basically, you're better than everyone else because you play in a competitive leagues or something like that. There's a lot of good people, like, like competitive. There's a ton of good people. There's just those little bad apples that get like implemented in,
It's
and it's just one
it's
of those, yeah, it's just one of those things that does happen. And I came to the conclusion that basically that's just not for me. I'm more of a casual player. I love playing with people. I love playing with everybody, to tell you the truth. But that still stigmatism still, I guess, haunts me to this day of dealing with the competitive people. There's just like, you can't, and so I don't really try anymore. I just, I just have that stigmatism like towards them. More power to them, though. Hey,
I
more
think
power to you guys. Enjoy your game. Do whatever you got to do. But there's other people out there, and that's
yeah.
what, like, I'm trying to explain. There's other people out there that do play the game casually that just want to go shoot people up with robots.
It really depends, though, like who we're talking about in the competitive community. I've also played in MWO's competitive community ages ago, and somewhat recently with MWO Reborn, I did actually join a Twitch streamer who was putting together a comp team, and all of them were noobs to start with and stuff. But the point, what I noticed is that lower level comp, there's no problem with elitism whatsoever. They lose most of their matches anyway, or at least they're going to win only half of them against people of their own level.
Yeah.
It's only when you get to the higher levels and stuff that you're going to see things like elitism, and you get these kind of cultural issues. To try and not just make it all from the First Circuit podcast perspective. When I have been, that was just one incident back in the day. Obviously, the Gulag, the Cauldron are now in charge of feedback, and I think obviously looking at the feedback process is a very important part. So I have had some people reach out and talk to me about their experiences and feelings about the feedback channel, and I think there was one good quote I got from somebody, just in casual conversation back and forth. So to give this here now, they said that the real problem in that channel slash server is that you've got certain people who are good at MWO and think of themselves as always being correct, and have not realized that being good at the game does not necessarily mean they are good at communication or at balance. They have supreme confidence that they are correct about everything, and so are blind to their own errors of understanding others. If you complain about being misinterpreted, they think you are just trying to cover for being wrong, and so they go on the offensive. This makes it pretty much impossible to have a constructive conversation, or to really learn anything from them either. The conversation basically ends as soon as you use a general term that they have a more specific one, a meaning for. And from my experience, this is very much sort of at least what we often sort of see from the feedback channel, at least a sort of prominent culture in there. And on top of that, I wanted to embellish this with like a recent example of my experiences, within the feedback channel, the Cauldron, on the competitive Discord. So somebody is complaining about the AMS Corsair and it being able to stop several LRM boats. A Cauldron member steps in and says, "Well, it only counters one mech very well." And the guy counters saying, "No, pugs do not coordinate their fire, and it can shut down more than one mech." I chime in because the other guy is actually right. Clan LRM is easily defeated by AMS because it streams, whilst IS LRMs fire and burst, and that leaves windows for other mechs to be shot down because pugs do indeed not coordinate. Someone says, try an LRM Fafnir and see whether the AMS Corsair entirely blocks that. And I ask, well, isn't that just like one of the best mechs at punching through AMS? Well, yes, it is, they say. I then ask, though, for quick play, what would be a good example of a more typical LRM boat? And that someone says, well, just don't run bad mechs. and goes on to give examples of other assault builds that can punch through AMS, that, the optimal examples of getting through AMS. Others chime in saying, if you must, here are the best builds that you can take. Um, and others say it doesn't make sense to look at non-optimal builds for balance. A Cauldron member chimes in. They ask, but what if we want to run a single LRM-15 for fire suppression? And they all then engage in banter, laughing at stock mechs or whatever.
That's a part of the elitism that basically that does happen a lot of times. Other people's opinions don't actually matter because quote, you're right. It doesn't matter if you're right. The game is supposed to be fun for everybody. Not just why are you using that mech that is obsolete. Well, I want to play because I like how the freaking paint job looks like. It's just like, who cares? This isn't your game. This is my game, your game, everyone's game. To tell you the truth, that's where elitism actually comes in, and they shut down everything else, no matter how basically no matter what your views are.
So my thoughts on this is that the guy bringing up the AMS core set is obviously doing so because he feels like it has an impact on the game. The AMS core set is often brought up and talked about because obviously how it interacts with missile mechs, and it's half decent at fighting itself. That's why it's a topic of conversation. It's why, at least in Group Q, we will often take AMS core set if there's too much missile on the field. It's like, oh no, there's too much missile. Let's take a bunch of AMS core set. That will help balance out the game. Now, in terms of being productive in conversation, it's not really a matter of being pedantic about exactly what the most optimum builds are. It's instead trying to recognize what me and the guy are talking about, which is saying, hey, AMS core set is pretty good. That's all I'm arguing for. And now we're getting into stock builds. We're talking about why are you running bad mechs or something like that. I'm not even saying bad mechs. It's the whole point, at least from if we're discussing, this is feedback. If we're discussing game design, the focus should be on obviously the impact AMS core set has on the game, and getting lost in, this what's the very, who will be the very best who ever was is a load of nonsense. All right.
Yeah. Well, speaking about stock designs, I did several videos just using stock mechs, and I got some good points. I got, 600 to 800 damage on a stock mech, and living at the same time. So, it's all about piloting. It's all about, like, different things that you do with the stock mech than just, like, oh, that's a bad mech, period. That's it.
I think stock mechs shouldn't really be where we design the game for, but very briefly, though, small missile counts are obviously a big deal when it comes to light mechs, because they don't always have a lot of missile hard points and they want to use missiles. So therefore, hey, an LRM-15 is nothing for an assault mech, but LRM-15 for a light mech can be quite an investment. But anyway, this is all focusing on game design when really what we're going to do is try and laugh at people who like stock mechs. We're trying to be petty and vindictive here. Remember, Bob, laugh at other people. Don't focus on game design. All right.
Sorry, I just like to have fun. That's all. Sorry.
I respond to their comments about it not making sense to look at suboptimal mechs. I say, well, doesn't it matter what we are optimizing for? A big, slow mech that can punch through AMS is not the same as what's best for quick play, where things like mobility can be quite valuable. That LRM Fafnir has a lot of LRMs, but it doesn't really, it's really slow and can easily, it takes a while to get into position. And if you get caught out of position, it's going to be really hard to get away and extract yourself from the enemy. So for most average players, they might actually prefer an LRM mech with a bit more speed to it. Things continue in a similar fashion. I slowly push my explanation of how people tend to play this game, whilst they tell me that LRMs suck, that LRMs are countered by AMS, and asking why do I even think this is an issue? The whole conversation ends when I make it clear that I'm just trying to clarify how effective the AMS Corsair can be, to which they respond with mockery. Someone new chimes in and types "wah," claiming it was an accident, to raucous applause from most of the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's my example of a recent experience of giving feedback in the Discord channel. And if this was randos, I guess it's okay. But the fact is that the fair number of Cauldron members are also chiming in on this culture, that they aren't focusing on the game design or on the important prescient points. They're instead adding to petty, just adding to the noise and stuff. So yeah, just to give my final thoughts on just the Cauldron and everything else. I'll say this. Whilst okay, fine, I am not perfect, and I'm not exactly the most affable of
Hold
people.
on, let me write
I
this down. The time and date.
Yes. I think that any reasonable actor would recognize that I am actually quite familiar with the game and that I can make well-structured arguments. Over the many months I have spent watching and interacting with this feedback channel, the dominant culture I've seen is one where that is both petty and vain. The way that people chitter chat is fine, though when they come into contact with even a mildly dissenting opinion, the response is usually blunt and close-minded. When I pitch in to talk about the potency of the AMS Corsair, then I was met with frivolous counterarguments based on silly premises, along with snickering about stock builds, and when those dirty tactics didn't work, outright mockery. Whilst I don't think that the competitive Discord needs to be turned into some big kind of hogbox, the pettiness, spite, and general lack of integrity exhibited by members of the Cauldron and this Discord has always been one of the most off-putting parts of the MWO community recently. Whilst I am in no doubt that the Cauldron are quite familiar with the game, that does not necessarily mean that they are good at managing a healthy community or at game design. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I definitely agree. I don't go there because it's like, why? If I'm going to be shut down, it's like, okay, I'll just go and do my own thing. Type thing. Or not even bring up points that should be brought up. And yeah, like I totally agree. That's why I never liked elitism from anybody. Play the game the way you want to go play. I don't care, how you play. Just have fun what you're doing. I don't care if I win or lose. Just play the game to have fun. And I just never liked elitism from a lot of different people that I've met throughout the years.
I think good game design is a very much sort of an art and a science that it's very difficult necessarily to point to what is exactly good game design, but that's what makes it so interesting to grasp and try and tackle with. The tricky thing is though, if you let your own personal issues and biases come in, that sullies the art of game design. That
Mm-hmm.
if somebody comes in and talks about the AMS Corsair and doesn't accept all of your points about LRMs, like just they're trying to shut down that conversation, even though there is a through line if you had solid integrity as a game designer, that we aren't encouraging that kind of culture. Instead, it's very much enforcing a hegemony of ideas. Like one analogy I sort of uh, felt was quite prescient with all of this is that feedback onto the Cauldron somewhat sort of resembles the People's Assembly of ancient Rome, of Republican Rome specifically.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly a rubber stamping process where politicians come to ratify their policies with the veneer of popular support. The crowd do actually have a say, and some valuable discussion does take place there. However, the mob mentality and selection bias does not make this place a very good form of democracy.
Yeah. This is kind of a point where I want to chime in. Bida has given us a couple examples of bad interaction we've had with the Cauldron. I do want to bring up one more example, one specific one, about giving feedback. So you guys may or may not remember many episodes ago when the whole integration of group queue into solo queue was discussed. We were very positive about it. In particular, we had Lush on back then for an episode or two, who very much supported the move, as did I. And it's at the point where every time Lush in particular, but sometimes also me, I've seen that, tries to give feedback on Reddit or directly the Discord for the feedback channels, we always get met with not, okay, I think your argument is stupid because, but rather, oh, aren't you the guy who thinks SoupQ is so amazing? Well, I'm not gonna listen to anything you have to say because you think SoupQ is amazing. And I really want to bring this up because I think this is the point where obviously Lars isn't here to talk about it himself, but that's what, as far as I can tell, completely drove him off of Reddit. He was fairly active over there for a long time, But then he's just been getting that whenever his name was mentioned, the competitive people, and in particular some people from the Cauldron as well, just bickering about SoupQ. And completely irrelevant what the original argument was. Just his name is for some reason now associated with something that the competitive community finds overly negative.
It's
And
even I, by the way, there was one discussion and some Cauldron member came in and was like, "Oh, well, you're sort of associated with someone who said things," and it's just, he's not discrediting the argument; he's discrediting me because I'm associated with a
yes,
person. You're attacking the person, not the argument.
yep. That's the number one rule in making arguments: never attack the person, always attack the argument. But yeah, I do want to bring up a couple additional points. I'll try to be quick to not draw our negativity out too much. Biter said he's pretty certain the Cauldron is quite familiar with the game. I want to bring up one counterpoint to that. There was a I think they lack an understanding of a lot of things that aren't as prestigeful to play. Big example for me is IS streak changes. The changes were made that we all agreed were absolutely terrible. The reason that was stated on the changelog page wasn't all that compelling. We later got from one of the Cauldron members that none of them really played streaks, none of them played missile weapon at all. They had like one guy who was actively playing missile weapons every now and then, and yet they're kind of just making changes to things they don't understand, and they realized it was terrible. They reverted those changes, but partially, and in my opinion, they still didn't probably do it the way they should have done it. And my impression from their public comments is they are tryhards and they like to be seen as tryhards. And after years of looking down on people who play weapons and actively cursing out anyone who dared use the good old LRM Atlas or the old streak mechs, they can't really get out of the toxic mindset. And this alone is a glaring issue for balance, as they will obviously focus on things they A, understand, and B, like or are good at. And as can seen by the heavy focus on laser weapons, which have always been a favorite of the primarily keyboard and mouse playing more tryhard community. Whereas obviously things like lock-on weapons have been always a favorite of people who play with joystick, gamepad, who can't aim quite that well and who rely on that game assist. Another thing that was mentioned by Bida, confirmation bias. The most vocal people of the Cauldron are the ones with the worst behavior. At least that's my very definite impression from Reddit and in particular the MechWarrior Online forums. There are certain people that have been running with a particular group that has been outright banned from the game. All of them except for that one guy, and that one guy is now probably the most vocal member of the Cauldron. And it shows that he's still not really changed his behavior from the toxic way he was back then. And I honestly don't know if that's the truth, but it feels like these toxic people are the ones who primarily collect feedback, which has a number of issues, but just to name a few. They
One
are the
thing
ones of the
I mentioned just to compare and contrast a little is I do sort of from discussions in the feedback channel, I do quite like what Navid has to do, where he comes in and says, "Hey guys,
yes,
here's an idea," and people give him some thoughts, and he responds to those, not attacking the people, but talking about the game as a game designer. And I'm really impressed by I think what
Yeah.
Navid does. I think he is a very technically minded person. He not perfect, no, by no means, no one's perfect, but I think he is a huge asset to the Cauldron.
yes,
And the tricky thing is that when I hear from a lot of the other ones, if I start narrowing in on issues of their game design, they just go, "Oh well, if you have any issues, please complain to other members of the Cauldron." And they always talk about, well, none of us agree. It's all a big democratic thing going on. The thing is, I think one of you guys are pulling everybody along, and it feels like a lot of the others are causing a lot of these issues that good game design is getting in the way of a lot because there's a lot, at least good games. I see a lot of petty people, there's going to be a lot of that pettiness when it comes to game design, and that's my concern.
yeah. Just to stress that Navid is definitely one of the best guys. If you have a conversation with him on the forums, he's always very rational, and he'll just completely ignore the other members of the Cauldron who tend to attack people more often. But still, the issue is if the people, like Bada said, which are the most petty, are the ones that seem like they're collecting the feedback, they have the most ego and are most likely to change, improve, summarize certain feedback to kind of fit the narrative. And maybe even more importantly, outsiders are less likely to give feedback in the first place because we'll just be laughed away, called names. The soup queue is going to be brought up whenever I try to give feedback on anything, whatever it is. And that also leads to a point where PGI, whenever they whenever they have time to look at the forums and stuff, they're going to see less and less feedback contradicting the Cauldron, meaning they're more likely to just rubber stamp whatever the Cauldron is doing. And yeah, it's just this kind of snowball effect again, right? People are less likely to give contradicting feedback because they'll just be laughed away. So less feedback is happening overall.
There's an issue with what's it called, survivorship bias, that you only really hear things from those who actually survive. And so the people who you've got to work with the game right now are those who have stuck with it for years. And that's not necessarily exactly one-to-one with the type of, with the people you want to come back.
Yeah, very true.
So to summarize my thoughts on the Cauldron, in my opinion, the biggest issue with the Cauldron is not necessarily their balancing decisions. I honestly don't play regularly enough to care about my stats, so nerf all my weapons, whatever, I don't care. I have fun playing, I don't really care about my numbers anymore. And also, people like Navid do give me some trust that their balancing isn't that terrible, but their main issue, in my opinion, is their public relationships. The group needs to either cut certain people that are very negative, or the Cauldron should be split up into multiple groups that have to argue with each other. I don't know. Love it or hate it, the Cauldron is very much interlinked with the future of MechWarrior Online, and I personally don't trust it to do a good job the way they're currently doing it. And that lack of trust is definitely contributing to my lower play hours in solo play.
To take a broader view a little bit in my head, it's in the past when it was under PGI, you could put your thoughts in the forums, but the forums were a toxic cesspool. Now that the game is actually being designed by the community, the state of that community does feel a lot more relevant. And so if you're very active in the game, it's quite discouraging seeing that aspect of the community much more. If you want to be involved, you have to be much more exposed to the awful sides of that community. Or if you're not that interested, you just have the patch notes, which are a nightmare to read through and don't really necessarily generate a lot of interest. So it's either boring patch notes, or you're involved and you either are happy with the toxic aspects of the community, you put up with it, or you're put up by it. And I'm kind of a bit put by it, so that's kind of why I'm not too keen to play the game. I'll just play something else.
100%. And I'm off-put by the behavior, so I have zero incentive whatsoever to get involved with the Cauldron. Even if they were to come around and like, hey, okay, you have very different opinion, wanna join us, bring in your perspective? Honestly, no. I've seen your Discord. I really don't want to take part of that Discord, period.
Yeah, Chim, I'm kind of like the same way. Like when we had the Cauldron on, I didn't want to be a part of it. I just don't really care. As far as different things that are going on. Granted, there are some good people in there, like Nevid, a couple others that I talked to that had really good like insights and stuff like that. I just during the episode, I just didn't want to be part of it, so I decided not to be there for the podcast. That's
when you chat with them in person by voice, they can be all right.
Yeah.
I think that there's the really tricky thing, just you see always online, like on Twitter and etc. etc. When you chat with random people, just nicknames on the internet via text, it becomes very easy just to, not necessarily put in the effort, or just, say, oh, you're just stupid, and just leave it at that. It's so easy just to belittle others and stuff because it's just text on the screen. I don't care. But yeah, because a lot of the feedback is handled by text, and there's no efficient filtering process that I'm really sort of seeing necessarily. There's no way that this democracy is actually being improved. I'm therefore not given a great feeling about the future necessarily. It's a status quo that isn't the most welcoming.
Yeah. To add on to it, I just don't like elitists. That's just one of my things. Like in
I
gaming.
think you've made that very
Yeah.
clear.
I don't like leeches, damn
Yes.
it. Okay, anyways, I'm done.
All right. I think though that is mostly
Yeah.
we've gone on for a good amount of time. That is mostly our sort of feelings about MWO Reborn at this sort of point that obviously PGI has had limited resources to really rework things, but I'm really kind of 50-50 about the changes. There's some good and there's also some bad, and it kind of evens out. And just the way I feel about the community and stuff, it leaves things a little bit negative for me, and I don't see a positive route out of all of this. And what baffles me is how out of touch all of this is. MWO is a dwindling game, and that situation should be rather humbling. Its stewards cannot afford to act unwisely, and they shouldn't try to pass the buck whenever they feel the pressure. When the kingdom's reputation is failing and the company is falling apart, we need to hang up our pride, tear away the red tape, and have an honest look at ourselves in the mirror with a mind to improve ourselves, because that is the only path to salvation.
That is a good take, man. Damn. Okay, and we'll leave it at that. This is episode 159 of the First Circuit Podcast with our host, Ian.
I have nothing to add to our eloquent British friend.
Yeah, I know. That was just damn.
Okay, thanks. Don't worry. They'll be telling me tomorrow that you should fire LRMs together and not try and fire them. Thank you, guys.
Yep.
Yes, you're very helpful.
And we have Ian as one of our hosts.
Thank you
hi.
for listening to this episode, and see you on the next one.
Myself, Oldbot10025, and thank you very much for being here. And Biter.
For some reason, we're covering the patch notes. See you next time.
Yes, we're covering the cap. Yeah, see you later. Goodbye.